ICU because others have let their guard down.
Wearing a mask, not bringing in the community when you're a young adult, so you're not bringing it back home to your vulnerable grandmother or your vulnerable aunt or uncle who has, high risk indicators for COVID.
A Garda investigation's underway after the unexplained death of a man in Carlow Town. Emergency services found the man in his 40s unresponsive at a house in the New Oak estate in the early hours of this morning. He died a short time later and a post-mortem is due to take place. Gardaí say the results of that post-mortem will decide the course of their investigation. The National Bus and Rail Union says HSE staff are being left by the roadside by double-decker buses, which can only carry 18. It says 9 routes serving Dublin hospitals are frequently full within 3 stops of starting the service. General Secretary Dermot O'Leary is calling for dedicated hospital routes.
HSE staff themselves have been complaining through social media and other media platforms in relation to not being able to access their bus of choice to get them to work. Really what we're saying to the NTA and Dublin Bus, maybe they might be looking at putting some designated buses in some of those pinch points.
It's 2 minutes past 3.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For peace of mind, we provide cover for your valuables outside of the home, once they're specified on your home policy. Go online to the aa.ie.
Rain spreading east and becoming widespread, but heaviest in Munster with some spot flooding. Windiest in the south with fresh to strong southwesterlies. Top temperatures of 10 to 15 degrees, cooler in the north. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Welcome back into the third hour of this afternoon's show. We will be having a chat about the rugby and Ireland's defeat against France on the last day of the Guinness Six Nations and what the future holds for the Irish team as the first calendar year comes to a close of Andy Farrell's stint in charge. They still have got 3 games coming up in this new Autumn Series Cup, which will get underway in a couple of weeks' time. We'll see if sweeping change is required and get the assessment of both James Downey and Fiona Steed in just a moment. Before that, though, I'll just bring you up to speed in the scores in terms of what's happening currently. It's full time now in the Connacht Senior Football Championship quarter-final, and Mayo have progressed to the last 4 with a victory against Leitrim by 2 goals and 15 points to 10 points. Also full time in the early throw-in in the Munster Senior Football Championship. That was the quarter-final between Tipperary and Clare. Tipperary hoping it'll be a double today for them in terms of hurling and football, but Tipper defeated Clare by a goal, 2-11 to 1 goal and 11. We're now well into the second half in the game between Donegal and Tyrone in the Ulster football. One of these 2 teams will have their pursuit of both the Anglo-Celt and the Sam Maguire brought to an end today. Donegal lead currently against Tyrone by a single point, 1 goal and 12 points to 1 goal and 11. And in Leinster, these games are all in the closing stages. It's Offaly 3 goals and 13 points, Carlow 17 points and Tullamore. In the game in Mullingar, it is Longford who lead by a single point against Louth, 1 goal and 8 points to 1 goal and 7. While at Wexford Park, it's now Wicklow 2 goals and 9 points, Wexford 11 points. So all 3 of those games very much in the balance going into the last 2 or 3 minutes. But time for us now to look back on the events at the Stade de France last night. Ireland going into the game with a chance of winning the championship for the 4th time in 7 seasons. They were going to need either a bonus point victory or, as it transpired with Italy keeping the score down against England, a 6-point differential over France with the try would have been enough to win the championship. But all that spoiled by France, Le Bleu winning by 35 points to 27, not the 30-point differential that France needed to put on Ireland to be crowned champions, and that means that England are champions for the 3rd time in 5 years. Not a bad time for English rugby. It's a men's and women's double in the Six Nations, and their clubs have also won the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup this year. So that is England, who are described in some of the newspapers of not having improved since the World Cup, but I think we would have taken that kind of year for Irish rugby. We've got James Downey and Fiona Steed with us. Folks, good afternoon to you.
Hi, how are you?
James, I'll throw to you first on this one, because Ireland, at least up until the closing stages of the first half, until Jacob Stockdale's error allowed France in for a try, it seemed the game plan at that point of trying to kind of measure themselves in terms of chasing points, but also not doing anything stupid defensively, seemed to be working quite well. But they were really hit by the concession of that try.
Yeah, I think so. And I think just before the game, you go into that and it's only going to be 6 points and a try to score a try, rather than that mammoth task of getting 4 tries. And I think the game plan initially in that first 40 certainly was going to plan. You saw the attitude in terms of the scrum, the set piece, I thought was huge, and the penalty at the start. And it shows the intent from the team. We got a penalty. Conor Murray has a shot at goal. doesn't go over, but that shows that we're just here. We need to win this game and grind out this game and get the win, and there's a reason why we've only won there a couple of times, and 2 years ago we won there obviously, but we haven't won there 2 in a bounce, and I think it's so frustrating then to see just 1 or 2 errors, and especially in that first half, and just let them back into the game. And look, the second half is a completely different one, I think, in terms of the amount of errors you made, and it's so frustrating to finish the Six Nations like that. But there were some good bits in that first half, but it is just frustrating, especially going forward, and how we just let it slip so much.
Yeah, 1928-29 is the last time that Ireland beat France in back-to-back games away from home. So that hasn't happened for them in quite some time now. But Fiona, when it comes to those individual mistakes, are they down to the system, or is it just down to individuals making mistakes in a high-stakes game?
Look, I think it's a combination. There was an awful lot of unforced errors yesterday, or forced by the French and their aggressive defence. But then there was individual errors. Obviously Stockdale has been picked out a couple of times, and that bobbling ball in front of you really need to be able to deal with that as a full back. But some of the passing was poor. There was a lot of bad passing. There was a lot of inaccurate passing. Now it was raining, but it was raining for the French as well. And I think when the changes were made then as well in the second half, when Chris Farrell came on, he went to do a switch, and it dropped the ball again, and there was just different things, but we just didn't seem to be, I suppose, right at the tempo in the second half. And like James said, you go in at half time, yep, we could have been up, but it was there for the taking. But I think the French came out a different side as well in the second half. So probably a combination of individual errors and a little bit of assistant error. Like the line out wasn't great, and I think the French defence of the line out, is in the first half they put 6 in to defend that maul, the line out maul straight off the right on the 5. So they had their homework done. Now if Ireland had gone off the top of that line out, then it would have been a completely different situation, because they had nobody out to defend. So the French really had their homework done, and I think were good value for the win in the end.
And James, looking at some of the analysis pieces in the papers today, they're making the point that the Ireland of kind of 2 years ago under Joe Schmidt, 2018, when they probably hit the peak of his tenure, seemed to be really good at converting these opportunities when they presented themselves. And I think Peter O'Reilly in the Sunday Independent today makes the point that he would have fancied the 2018 team at the point when Robbie Henshaw scores that individual try, and then not too long afterwards Ireland are in good field position, that they would have probably converted the chance and taken their time and been patient, while this team seemed to just make individual error after individual error when they had that pressured period inside the French 22.
Yeah, look, that's an interesting comparison. I guess I can see where Peter's making it, but I think that if we look back to how we were when we were playing under Joe Schmidt, that we were box kicking it too much and people were complaining and they were giving out about the rugby, and now it's been turned on its head. There has been a little bit of box kicking, yeah, but I think it's been more of an onus on the players to make the decisions out there, and I think that it's been a better brand of rugby than we played before. So it's really what people want, It's like, do we want to win games, or do we want to play great rugby, or do we want both? And it's so hard to get that balance right. I do think that we were unlucky in certain opportunities in the game. I think Fiona mentioned it there. We had the chance just before half time when Johnny makes a decision out in the field to go for the corner. And you're going up against a side who are defensively coached by Sean Edwards, who has been immense for Wales in the past couple of years, and we know what they can bring. But the Irish guys should have expected that they're going to really target this here. They're really going to go for us. So it's a different attitude, I think, that the players had as well. I think that it's a flip that normally we would take those 3 points, and in hindsight, might have been the right thing to do. And if you're comparing oranges and apples for me, I think I get very frustrated when you kind of hear those comparisons. With Joe we would have done this, and like I've talked about it, we get so frustrated with what Joe did, and he had his power plays. I think we have to entrust in the players. I do think that Andy Farrell does need to bring a bit more of a game plan, and not more of a game plan, but more of a structure to tell the players a bit more to do. I think off broken play, that's when the leaders and the decision makers can make those calls and if we're going to the corner, we're going to the corner, play different things. But again, it's the individual errors. It's down to those errors of the people at this level. It's unacceptable, I suppose. But look, it is frustrating for everyone involved.
Well, Fiona, Andy Farrell's had 5 games in charge now, and it was always going to be a little bit tricky in terms of coming off the back of a World Cup, going pretty much directly into a Six Nations Championship and trying to implement your ideas. But in terms of what we've seen in these 5 games, is it an improved brand of rugby compared to what we were playing 12 months ago?
Yeah, again, the comparison thing, to be honest, as an Irish person, I want us to win and, win whichever way you can, really, So, yeah, and people, deciding, well, it would be better if we played better, if we did something that looked a little bit different. And I'm not going back to 2018 because I think it's a completely different setup now, but winning is winning, and winning tournament rugby is about winning. If you look at the way England played yesterday, it was, it was dour really as well, but they won, and they've won the Six Nations on the back of that, but they won. And Eddie Jones hasn't dramatically changed his style over the last 2-3 years, so they're sticking with their game plan, which is winning for them by and large. So does the brand need to change? I don't necessarily think it does. I think it, like James is saying, individual errors yesterday, I think, Gary Ringrose is a huge talent that we didn't have. I think Henshaw did really well at 13, but there was just a couple of pieces of the jigsaw not quite there yesterday, which would have allowed us to play a different brand of rugby. Larmour in at full-back potentially allows us to play a different brand of rugby, and more heads-up rugby, more playing what you see in front of you. And I think we'll know more at the end of the next 3 games. I think it'll be more of an assessment as to where we're at. But I suppose new coaching ticket, you hear all of that, but Wales have new coaches in since the World Cup, Italy, France, and ourselves, and ours isn't so much a dramatically different setup. Obviously, Mike Catt is in as well, but so everybody has had the same piece to work with, apart from England and Scotland, who have been relatively settled in their backroom team. So I think everybody is still feeling the way they want to play, or that they can play, playing to their strengths. And, Andy Farrell's obviously been around the squad long enough. He knows where the strengths are, but he wasn't afraid to make changes in terms of bringing in Connors, bringing in Keenan. So if he hadn't have done anything, and if he hadn't changed, people would be complaining that he hadn't changed or that he hadn't tried anything. So I really think, it's great for them that they have another 3 games in, close enough time to see where they're at come the next year's Six Nations. And I think a lot of the other teams will be the same as well, and that they will look towards this autumn period now to gear up for next year's Six Nations. And I think then you can have a legitimate conversation around where they're at and what brand they're playing.
James, Stockdale took a bit of flack last night, understandably, because he should go down on the ball. If he does, we don't cough up that try towards the end of the first half. Some people were saying, look, this is evidence that he can't play at fullback. But the thing is, to me, that was an error that could have happened if he was on the wing. That's an error that could have happened if he stepped a couple of feet in field and was effectively standing in midfield. That was more of an individual error than an issue with Stockdale at fullback. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you in that. I think he's kind of been scapegoated a little bit. Look, he'll hold his hand up himself, I'm sure, and say it wasn't his best game at all. And his form has fluctuated a little bit over the past month, perhaps. But look, Rob Kearney was talking yesterday before the game, and he had said it takes a few games at this level to actually establish yourself as an international. It's one thing playing provincial, but you've got to play continuously at this level, at that international level, and against quality week in, week out. And this is a chance for someone for Andy Farrell especially to put maybe a bit of faith in Jacob, give him 1 or 2 more games with Wales on Friday, see how he goes. And if he doesn't step up to it, then look, he's given him a chance rather than dropping the first time. I do think there's pressure there. I think Hugo Keenan's been superb on the wing, naturally a fullback in it. So he could be a switch. Jordan Larmour mentioned there as well, and James Lowe might come into things as well. So look, there's players there that we have quality-wise. I think in terms of if we're looking at Jacob himself, I think that Andy Farrell should back him a bit more and just give him a bit more game time. I think it's wrong just to throw it all out after 1 or 2 games. And yeah, he might not have his best game yesterday, but hopefully he'll get given a chance to dust himself off and try and change that perception on Friday. Yeah, because Fiona, trying to find an option at 15 has been an issue really since Rob Kearney was falling out of the Ireland picture, and they tried Robbie Henshaw there against England at the Aviva Stadium for a single game, almost with the World Cup in mind last year. Jacob Stockdale, because of Jordan Larmour's injury, has been entrusted with the full-back position for these last 2 games of the Six Nations. Hugo Keenan, in theory, could fill back in there. Andrew Conway could probably swap from the wing, maybe with Earls or Lowe coming into the team in a couple of weeks. It's not that Ireland aren't without options at full-back, but probably someone has to be trusted in that position at least until Jordan Larmour comes back from his shoulder surgery.
Yeah, and like Larmour wasn't it straight away either, and he has to come back from shoulder surgery and to make his way back into the Leinster team and back into this team. And like looking at the stats from yesterday, like Stockdale was still our top carrier in terms of like I think he carried 15 times, made the most meters. So when you're getting the ball most, you are more likely to make more mistakes as well, in that he has the ball more often. The couple of glaring errors were there, but we could see that he is a devastating attacker with the ball in hand. So absolutely, I'm agreeing with James. I wouldn't be throwing him out at all with the bathwater, and I think that it's whether he's there or whether he moves back onto the wing, he's certainly a potent attacker. Has he been at his best of late? No, he hasn't. Has he been struggling a little bit for Ulster? Probably. But I think that certainly I think he should be there in the squad, and there's there is competition for places, and when players play in the position as long as Rob Kearney did and did it so well, then it's going to be a natural evolution. It will be the same at 10. When somebody eventually takes over from Sexton, like when there's people in positions for a long time, they play a certain way, and it takes I suppose it takes time for somebody else to come in and to put their own stamp on it.
Yeah, and it's difficult as well because we had 2 very good defensive fullbacks over a prolonged period of time with Gervin Dempsey and Rob Kearney, and you almost forget when they were so defensively solid that successors had to be found, and these are young lads who are getting a chance at senior international level. I'm sure Stockdale will continue at 15 for Ulster too. He says it's his preferred position. Of course, our rugby coverage is brought to you with thanks to Vodafone, team of us, everyone in. James, when it comes to James Lowe coming in, I mean, we saw him running at the captain's run last week at the Aviva Stadium in the full Irish tracksuit. It's just a matter of days before he's qualified now to play for Ireland, and he's going to come into contention in the next few weeks to make his debut. Do you think he goes directly into that team, or will he have to wait his time a little bit?
It's going to be an interesting one because Andy Farrell's had him so involved in those matchday squad, or just outside matchday, the training squads, the additional players that are there. So he's pretty much done everything bar take the field, so he's grooming him for something. And I think that if people think that we need something else or need that little bit of X factor or a finisher, a different quality, James Lowe certainly has it, and he's done it for Leinster. So for him to wear the green of Ireland, I'm sure would be exciting for all Irish fans. Who he goes in for at the moment, I don't know. You mentioned Keith Earls is coming back there. We can't forget about him, and Conway's there, and what Hugo Keenan hasn't put a foot wrong. These guys, it's tough, and the competition's there, and that's why he's got to be in the top of his game to actually push it. I guess if you have a question over James Lowe, it could be his defence. If you're trying to pick something out, he's maybe slipped up once or twice for Leinster, but again, you take a bit of that if you're going to get that X factor from someone on a certain day. Personally, yeah, I think that he is going to jump in. I think the first opportunity, you got to throw him in and see how he goes. We're in a World Cup cycle, so we're it's a time to try players now rather than bring them to a World Cup and see what happens. Now is the time to try things. Now's time to try different combinations, different players. Fiona's mentioned that certain players won't be around the whole time, so when do you blood these guys in? When do you play them? Now's the time. You might lose a couple of games, yeah, but you'll find your way. There's no point in winning Six Nation after Six Nation after Six Nation, coming to a World Cup and then falling short and falling as we've done in the past couple. So I think that they'll bring James Lowe in and they'll give him a shot from the start.
Fiona, just to change the conversation to the back row, it's incredibly competitive for anyone to try and get in. I was watching Peter O'Mahony's press conference this week, and he was saying he'd love to be playing, but he's accepting that there's guys in great form and he has to play a role within the 23 as things stand. You look at it that when Ian Henderson comes back from suspension, he could well slot back into the second row, which means Tadhg Byrne, who's barely put a foot wrong in the second row, a lot of carries last night, becomes an option at 6'2". It's a fiercely competitive area, but is it going to be very difficult for Peter O'Mahony to get back in now, given these young guns have taken places during this tournament?
I know, it's really, really exciting. I always love the back row, and looking, just the competition that's there for it is fantastic. I mean, I think Byrne was good yesterday. I think Stander was exceptional yesterday. Both with his carries and his steals, his work rate, absolutely fantastic. Connors and Doris a little bit quieter, I think, and perhaps it was a step up for them as well. Playing Italy at the Aviva one week, and then playing against like Aldry and Olivier, who were they were absolutely magnificent yesterday. I think it was 27 tackles or 20 something for both of them anyway. Huge, absolutely fantastic. So I suppose that was a step up for them. Personally, I think Josh van der Flier is, I still think that he has the edge on Connors, but obviously I'm not picking the team. I think he's a little bit more about him and a little bit more experience, but again, they're pushing each other. And then to get back to your question, you're looking at Peter, I suppose, fighting for that sixth spot or that bench spot, and he has proven time and again, like when his cameo off the bench last week was fantastic. He put himself about yesterday, didn't have, I suppose, huge amounts of time. It will be hard, but that's a really good situation to be in. Is Byrne, is he a back row? He's certainly somebody that you want in your 23, and I think, look, it's fantastic to have such strength in numbers in the back row, but then when they're on the pitch, that they have to put it in, and dare I say, we were outplayed probably by and large by the French back row yesterday. So it's getting that right balance as well. And like Peter adds a lot. He adds a lot defensively at the line out as well. He has that experience that the others don't have. So huge. I mean, it's a great conundrum to have as to who you're going to pick. But you have to get the balance right. Obviously, if you move Byrne there, he's a line out option as well. And I don't see Doris, or I know they used CJ a little bit yesterday, but I don't. So it's all of that to take into account. It's certainly interesting.
James, it's a hell of a balancing act, and I'm sure form is going to play a lot into this. And you even look at Dan Leavy coming back last week, thankfully, after being out for over a year with his knee injury, and great to see he came through with no complications after their game against Zebre. I think Stuart Lancaster was saying it could be the new year before he's back at international level in terms of his fitness and form, but he will come back into contention again. Is there a proper balance at the moment, or is there three players that emerge for that back row for you currently?
Oh, it's such a tough position, and we haven't even mentioned Jack Conan or someone like Max Deegan, who's out for the year now. But yeah, it's going to be tough. I agree with Fiona. I think Josh. I think Will's been very, very good now. I think he's been superb for Leinster, especially. And yeah, look, he's been put in that situation, and his attitude and the way he tackles and his technique is second to none, and getting off the line. Sometimes he does go a bit quiet. It's a massive step up, and I guess, look, we've been blessed that we've had Josh van der Flier there, and as you mentioned there, Dan Leavy in the past. I think Josh could come back into contention, especially on Friday, given the way the Welsh have played. CJ, I think, has made his own from when he's had the critics saying you need to offer a little bit more. He has done. He's answered time and time again. And for the sixth position, I don't know. It is that balance. It's what you're looking at. Like Pete drifted off a bit and then answered the call, got the pressure put on, and had to make an impact, and came on and did make an impact and made a statement. And that's what you want. You want the players pushing themselves week in, week out, and not just to be content and can't just rely on that you're going to be selected every week and not look over the shoulder. There has to be someone pushing you, and that's the great thing at the moment, and you can move things around, and there are liner options. I don't know who I'd put at 6, to be honest. I'd kind of nearly go about who I'm playing against, what the opposition would be to dictate that sort of play. But look, plenty of options, and it's one area where we're extremely strong.
Yeah, Fiona, I know we've been very Irish-centric on the fallout in terms of what's happened in the Six Nations, but if you look at France's half-back pairing in the moments in the game where they had to shine, That looks like a world-class 9 and 10 pairing they have currently.
Yeah, look, they're absolutely a joy to watch, and they're still so young and so inexperienced. And you wondered a couple of times yesterday, you know, like with Entomac, you know, could he do it on that stage in that pressure? And he did, by and large. I mean, they're fabulous. They really, really are. And Dupont, like, he was nearly man of the match for me. I thought he was fantastic. And it just shows really that size isn't necessarily a problem when you're that good. And they've come through the 20 system. Is one slightly a year older than the other. And I think, you know, for Dupont to have Galtier as his coach, you know, could you ask for better than, you know, having such a former world-class 9 as well. So, and they're on an upward trajectory in terms of, you know, even if you look at Demba Bamba coming on, like, I mean, he was under 20 against us there, you know, a few years ago. They've got great youth, but they're not afraid, a bit like New Zealand, they're not afraid to let them get on and get at it. You know, if they're good enough, then they're old enough. And I mean, we saw that in Italy too, you know, with Franco Schmidt coming in and, you know, like going with the youth and giving them this Six Nations as well to, I suppose, to grow and to learn together and to, like, with 2023 in mind. So I think there is exciting there. And like, then you look at, you know, Wales, looking at their lads who are sort of all shoving sort of the other side of the 30 bracket and a bit beyond it. And you think like they've not had a great Six Nations at all. And where are they going to go with regard to bringing in youth and stuff? So it just, look, it's such an exciting time to have so much rugby on so much rugby to watch. It's great.
I want to get both your opinions on Jonathan Sexton when he came off. I'll come to you first on this, James. There's 11 minutes left in the game. Andy Farrell makes the decision to make a raft of substitutions. One of them is Ross Byrne to come on. Jonathan Sexton comes off. He sees himself on the screen. He's shaking his head and very, very annoyed about the fact he's been taken off while the game is still somewhat in the balance, maybe slightly slipped away, but still there. Was his reaction understandable, or is that disappointing to see from your captain?
For me, it's understandable. It's extremely frustrating to be taken off at any time, and especially when you're someone as competitive as Johnny, and given where the game was. And it's kind of, we've been so used to, or he's been so used to kind of seeing out these games and not having that pressure. But now it's kind of there's an eye on a past Johnny Sexton, and you've got to put someone like Ross Byrne in a situation where he's to try and get us out of it, and he's to try and win this game and grab by the scruff of the neck. It can't always be Johnny. But for me, Johnny is, look, he's, as I said, he's so competitive that to come off the field, and it's just frustrating. No one wants to come off, and especially your captain, and you're the 10, and it's a roll of a dice. It didn't come off, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen more and more as well, and I think he's got to understand that and learn to manage it.
Fiona, you've been there in leadership situations. Would you be aware in those circumstances that it's about the team rather than you personally, or is it understandable that maybe personal frustration might kick in as opposed to the outward image you're trying to give off?
Look, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and I mean, I suppose maybe he could have known that the cameras would pan to him, but you know, of course he's frustrated, disappointed with the way the game was going, probably disappointed with some elements of his own game. I think it's understandable, and I think we can make more out of this than needs to be. Like, jeepers, anybody, even, I don't know, apart from maybe third teams players, nobody wants to come off a rugby pitch. The under-10s don't want to come off when they're swapping them around, you know, when they're playing blitzes and stuff. Like, that's why we play sport. But yes, he does need to come off at times, or maybe not start, and we need to look at the bigger picture piece. I still think he's the best 10 that we have, absolutely. I think that he is probably the best leader that we have. I do think we need to start other people, because if he's injured and if he doesn't make it to 2023 and all of these pieces, and absolutely, I don't think he should start all of the next 3 games. I think we really do need to, to work on others as backup to that. And I think that's normal, and that has to be part of it, and that's the conversation that has to happen. Those of us that are very expressive with our faces and wear our hearts on our sleeves, we can't help that. And you can totally understand his frustrations. And I think sometimes people just like to, So what's he supposed to do? Smile coming off? Like, I mean, they're losing. It's not been a great game. You know, this was the Six Nations that was there for them to win. Of course, he's going to be fed up. What other expression is he going to have on his face? You know, so I think some people are just looking for other stuff to write about and talk about, to be honest.
Fiona, disappointment too in terms of the Women's Six Nations, in that Ireland desperately needed to get some fixtures in here. They were able to play against Italy last week. Wasn't a vintage performance, but you know, they got back playing at least after the defeat at Twickenham, and there'd been a big 5-6 month period to try and fill in without having had games. Then it looked like the France game was going to be off because of the rules around travel, and the team wouldn't be able to go to France. Then fortunately the French team were willing to play it in Dublin as opposed to in Lille. And then unfortunately, very close to the game, only a few days out, the French team had a COVID outbreak and Ireland missed out in the fixture. Missing this fixture, though, is important, given that there probably will be this World Cup qualifying tournament at some point in the close horizon, and Ireland would have loved to have got a fixture in against a good team ahead of that.
Yeah, look, it's a real shame, because they beat, as you say, it wasn't a great performance last week against Italy, but they beat them, they put them away. You know, it was 3 home wins from 3 home wins. And then the fact that France were coming to town on the back of, they only drew with Scotland last week, the women over in Scotland. So it was a real opportunity, I suppose, for the team and for Adam Griggs to see where they were at. Okay, and it was also second match in, because they'll play Italy again in this tournament. So really disappointing, because France are a class outfit. They took the foot off the pedal mentally, I think, when they went to Scotland. They didn't play all of their known starters as such, and Scotland played really well, you know, at Scottstown. So it would have been a great game for them to have. Now, there's a bit of doubt. The series for them to qualify for the World Cup is scheduled for the first 3 weekends in December, where they're due to play Scotland, Italy, and another, which is most likely to be Spain as the other best side in Europe. So they really needed this to see where they were against France, and for a second, you know, competitive run out. They've been training consistently, and they've had a lot of training sessions up in the High Performance Centre. But you know, as you know, you can't beat matches for putting things together. You know, Hannah Tyrrell came in at 10. The last, James, a bit like, you know, you're talking about 10s or talking about players getting chances. She was the 8th 10 that Adam Griggs has used in his tenure. So she really needed another game in close succession to, you know, to build and to grow. She's a fantastic footballer. She's well able to play, but hadn't played at 10. So it was absolutely necessary for her. They had to put, you know, the line out didn't function really well. The scrum wasn't great, but they managed to shore it up at the end and get a penalty try. So they really needed this second game in quick succession to right the wrongs and to build on the victories, because they have had three good wins this year.
Yeah, disappointing they get to play it. Fiona Steed, James Downey, thanks a million for joining us to round up the last of the Six Nations weekends for this season. The next championship is going to come around very quickly indeed. Everton, who were Premier League leaders into the weekend, are trailing 1-0 now at Newcastle. Everton trying to close the gap on the new leaders Liverpool. Southampton earlier beat Aston Villa by 4-3. Our live game here on Off the Ball is coming up at 4:30. That's Old Trafford, Manchester United against Arsenal. Brian Kerr and Stephen Doyle will be on commentary there. And the late game is Spurs against Brighton at 7:15. In the Gaelic games, most of the matches have now concluded for today. We'll be looking forward very soon with Clare legend Jamesy O'Connor to the game between Tip and Limerick. But the full times from today in the Munster Senior Football Championship quarter-final, Tipperary winners against Clare by 2-11 to 1-11. In the Connacht Senior Football quarter-finals, Mayo 2 goals and 15 points, Leitrim 10 points. Today in the Leinster Championship, Offaly 3 goals and 14 points, Carlow 20 points. Longford winning against Louth by 2 points, 1-9 to 1-7. And it has finished up Wicklow 2 goals and 9 points, Wexford 11 points. And full time from Ulster, Tyrone, Mickey Hart's side out of the championship in the last few moments. Donegal winning by 2 points in the end, 1 goal and 13 points to 1 goal and 11 at Ballybuffet. So Donegal march on and Tyrone out of the championship on weekend 1. We'll be looking forward to the action at Páirc Uí Chaoimh, where it's wet and windy ahead of the game between Tipperary and Limerick with Jamesy O'Connor when we come back after this break.
Off the Ball on News Talk.